Everyone for being here. Thanks for the opportunity to share my thoughts on a topic that is near and dear to my heart as somebody who has built and sold a tool for the AEC industry that is basically a BIM data management and analytics tool. So I'm excited to talk to you about that, and I'll be sharing it through the lens of my experience building and selling Kinship, which is our product. So to start off, just a little bit about me. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Kinship. You can find us online at kinship.io. I've been working with Revit content in some form or another since 2008. So I guess that's 15 years now, which feels like a long time. In my role today, I meet with multiple BIM teams every week, hearing about the challenges and goals they have around BIM content management, project analytics, those sorts of topics that Kinship deals with. And I'm very passionate about usability and customer centricity. And I think that's something that's really at the heart of our product and the heart of our company, is trying to provide a tool that not only has a great deal of functionality, but is highly usable, and that we are always kind of thinking of things from the customer standpoint and trying to understand really intimately their pain points and the ways that can best solve those problems for them. And so just a bit about Kinship as well. It's for teams working in Revit, so we do deal specifically with Revit. And the heart of the product is content management and content search. So basically, how do you bring together all of the digital content that you want your teams to be using for projects, make it super easy for people to find and access that content when they're working on projects. But Kinship also does project tracking, so lets people see like what's going on in their projects, what's the activity, what content is being used there, information and metrics that relate to things like model health and project performance. And lastly, it includes analytics. So basically, you bring all this data together in one tool, then you can start to get some useful insights out of that in different areas around like things like what's the most used content by the team, which kinds of projects run most efficiently, how is your overall Revit environment performing. So into the kind of heart of today's talk, I wanted to start with this sort of fictitious quote that for me makes me smile, but it also rings very true because it's something that I hear in some form or another from almost every customer that we have, and it takes the form of like could Kinship tell us this? Could we see this piece of data? Is there a way that you could give me access to X, Y, or Z? And it's a very natural impulse to always want to have more data, especially when in the world of BIM, there's a lot of data that is kind of remains dark, as we say, like it's inaccessible or very difficult to access, very difficult to centralize or share among a team. So it is a natural impulse and totally understandable. And there is obviously value in some way to having more data than less data. But there is also, we think, a big problem with this mentality of just like the more data, the better. And the first thing is just kind of distinguishing between data and information. And I think for everyone, in today's meeting, maybe this will be a remedial slide, but I think it's important to, think about what is the difference between them. Like, you have data as just sort of raw and unorganized facts. Data points can just be totally individual and not connected to other data. It's not interpreted, so it's just on its own, not meaningful by itself, and it doesn't really help with decision making. So just kind of raw data as it is actually doesn't have a lot of value. You have to do something with it. You have to turn it into information, and so sometimes that distinction, I think, still gets lost when it comes to building tools, building products for firms to actually use in a real world environment. And on the other hand, you have information. So obviously that's based on data, but it's data that's getting analyzed and interpreted. It's organized, structured in some way. it's put into a context, and then it can inform decisions. So there's one step of going from like, just give me more data, to like, well, just actually give me more information, or let's think about whether that can be turned into information. But I would even go a step further and say that more information does not necessarily lead to better BIM, and that's for several reasons. First, it's easy to focus on the wrong information, and it might not be totally wrong information, but it might not be the best information for the particular problem that somebody's trying to solve. So what I see a lot of times is just people want more data points related to a problem that they have, or a task that they want to accomplish, but they haven't really thought about how are they going to use that information, or is that the best kind of information to inform what they want to do. It might be sort of the most one that comes most immediately to mind, or the most commonly discussed one, or maybe the one that's easiest to access, that's kind of right there in the Revit model or in the Revit content, but it might not be the best possible information available for the problem that they're trying to solve. The second thing is information could be difficult to decipher or interpret. So just kind of throwing more information on the screen, dumping more data into people's interface, doesn't necessarily allow them to interpret what that is and how they should use it. So there's also a step that needs to be taken of understanding, like, what is the best way to present that information so that it can be understood properly. And one thing that we often say at Kinship is like, we are not big fans of dashboards, or maybe like dashboards is where information goes to die, because dashboards can be great. It's not that they are without use or without value, but it's the kind of format where it's just easy to pile more and more information into a space. And in the end, you're not really, it becomes difficult maybe to understand or decide what you should focus on, whether something means you need to do something or not, whether something means that there truly is a problem or not. And then the last one is that information might be presented in a way or in a context where it doesn't facilitate action. And again, dashboards can be guilty of this a lot of times, which is like, you're looking at the dashboard and you see that some metric, some graph looks like there's something wrong, but then there's no way to actually like follow that information and get to a place where you can act on it. So, it might raise an alarm bell. 30% of our projects are running too slow. Well, okay, but which 30? Can you identify who's in charge of those projects? Can you see maybe what server environments they're on, or see something about the people working on them that would allow you to follow up on that? Or is it just setting off an alarm bell that something is wrong, and now you have to go somewhere else and deal with other information or other channels to try to get to take that action? So these are the issues that we see with kind of just the idea of maybe not just more data, but more information being the answer to achieving more or having better results with BIM. So this brings us to the concept that I want to share today, which is usable information. And so that's something that we try and practice as much as possible with Kinship, ensuring that any information we're going to put out there through the product that we're going to make accessible to customers is done in a way that is highly usable. And so what do I mean by that? First, I mean, it's information that's highly relevant to the problem being solved. So this goes back to the previous point of like, you could end up looking at the wrong information. So we want to put some thought into, not just thinking about what information is available related to what you're doing, but what is the most relevant information to the problem that needs to be solved or the job that's to be done. So if you're talking about models running slow, then are you going to look at like the most, I don't know, the last 24 hours of sync times or open times? Are you going to look at the average over the last 30 days, over the last 24 hours? Do you want to look at just the worst time in the last 24 hours? Like, those are all potentially really valuable points, but if I give you all 4 or 5 of those, you won't know where to focus. So you got to pick one, and you have to put some thought into what is the one that's going to really tell you, what you need to do, or if there is a problem that needs to be addressed. The second point here is usable information will minimize the cognitive load for the user. So basically, trying to make it as, in a way, thoughtless as possible to understand what that information is telling you. So again, like, if you're thinking about, you want to have maybe a project health dashboard, you could pile that dashboard full of metrics, of pieces of information that, if you look at all 10 of them or 15 of them, you can come to some idea of whether that project has issues or not. But that requires a lot of thought on the part of the person reading that dashboard. Whereas maybe you can come up with some, formula, some rule set there that distills that into, like, say, a stoplight icon. Like, if it's green, you're all good. If it's yellow, it probably needs some attention, but it's not going off the rails. And red is like, this needs immediate attention. And behind that could be those 10 or 15 pieces of information that the other dashboard also has. But in the case of, like, the stoplight, the person doesn't have to think about whether they should look into something or not. That's what the information is telling them. And then from there, they could dig deeper. And the last point is, it will be presented in an actionable context. That's not always possible. I don't think it's always 100% of the time possible to give people information in a context where they can act on it within that context. But as much as possible, thinking about whether the context you're presenting the information in is the most actionable, or has some way to be brought into an actionable context, is really important. I mean, I'm calling this usable information. So this is basically the point of, is this information given to me in a way where I can actually make use of it now, as opposed to having to maybe go somewhere else, use some other tool, look for some other information before I'm able to take an appropriate action. So how will you know if the information you're presenting to people is usable? I think there are a few kind of telltale signs around this. One is that to the person consuming that information, using that information, it will feel really easy and simple. That doesn't mean that it's easy and simple to present that information, to develop it or distill it. But to the person consuming it, it will feel very intuitive, very simple, very easy to digest and work with. Kind of related to that is, like, the user will get it right away, meaning very little need to interpret or kind of decipher what the information is telling them. It should be something that when somebody looks at it, it's obvious to them what the information actually means. On a sort of presentation layer, I would say that usable information allows people space to focus and won't feel too crowded. And again, dashboards, I can always hold those up as a sort of poster child of not usable information, but they can easily become so crowded, with 20 different metrics, charts, lists, and so on. And the more crowded things get, the harder it is to focus and decide where your focus should go. And so usable information will be presented in a way where there's space for literally the person's eye to focus on what they need to, and their attention won't be sort of immediately pulled away by 5 other things that may or may not be relevant. And the last point here is that detail comes in layers. So this is something that I'll point to in just a moment, and looking at how we do this with kinship. But information, can be extremely detailed, extremely simple, but inevitably, like, there's generally, like, a kind of chain of detail that comes from a first kind of overarching piece of information to maybe the full story of what's behind that. And so, like, going back to that example of, say, a stoplight, kind of graphic to tell you whether a project is running smoothly or has some issues or needs immediate attention. You could think that, well, if it needs immediate attention, it's red. That's great. It told me that I need to look into this, but now I need to be able to click into that and see what those issues are that have turned it red. So from whatever list of 10 or 15 things we wanted to check, highlight the 2 or 3 or 4 that are not going well that I need to focus on. And then maybe I can click through that and see what's the detail behind that that's telling me that the project is failing with regard to that particular metric or that particular measure. So usable information is something where not everything is shown right at once, but the user can kind of decide whether they want to dig deeper and deeper from some starting point that's as relevant as possible, as easy to understand, and easy to focus on as possible. So to finish here, I just want to show you a bit about how we kind of try and put this into practice with our product Kinship. So the first thing I'm going to show you here is just a clip of how Kinship works within Revit to allow somebody to find content. And the things that I want to highlight here are that the search appears within the context of the user's application. They don't have to go anywhere else. They have filters that are kind of dynamically populated based on the result that they're seeing. The results are high level. They can then go in to inspect further as and if they need, getting down to as detailed as all the individual parameter values. And then at the end of that, when you find what you need, you're able to action it, immediately load it and place it within the model space where you're working, and return right back to your original working context. So trying to kind of capture all those principles of where is the information presented, starting at a high level, having it be kind of context driven, allowing somebody to dig deeper if and when they need to, and making it easy to focus on what is most important to them. The next thing I wanted to point out or share here is just our library landing page. So this is, you have your content in Kinship. This is where you're managing all your content. You come to your library online, and what do you see? And, originally when we had sort of the initial version of the product, you just landed on basically a massive list of, all the content that you have in your library. Of course, you could sort it and filter it, but it was just like the master list. And you can still get to that from this page if you click on all items, which you see in the top left of the screenshot there. But what we decided to do in a second pass is like surface different types of content, different areas of content that could be particularly relevant, and allow somebody to jump into those more quickly, action things that might be particularly relevant, and dig deeper as they need to. So for example, at the top, you have different kind of major types of content like components and systems and so on. If you click into one of those, then you'll see the categories that are part of that type of content within Revit. And those categories will be sorted and shown to you by usage. So you won't just see a massive list of all the categories that are part of components, because there are a ton of them within Revit. You'll see the ones that you're actually using the most, because most likely those are the ones that you would want to deal with. Or in the new and updated section, this is the content that's most recently been added or updated in the library. So that might be content that from a management perspective you need to keep dealing with. Maybe you uploaded it here, now you need to rename it, now you need to check it, now you want to further organize it. So very likely that you might want to come here rather than just seeing everything in the library, focus on the stuff that is newest, and also be able to action it. So like you can see there's a little edit button that can also be a load button. So basically allowing you to then take this family, this content, and open it directly within Revit from here and work with it further. So again, making it something that's actionable. And then the last example I have here is an example of a crash report page within Kinship. So this is more on kind of the Revit environment management that Kinship helps with. Anyone that's worked in Revit knows that, sooner or later it crashes and it's somewhat inevitable, but there can be times where, a model is crashing repeatedly, a certain users Revit installation is continually crashing, and those are real pain points and things that are difficult to solve. And one of the reasons that they're so hard to solve is it's very hard to get access to the relevant IT and Revit session information that would allow somebody to sort of investigate that and come to some understanding of what the problem is. Usually this is like, IT chasing after people. Hey, can you send me your journal file? What's a journal file? Where is it? By the time they get to it, the problem has gone, or they never actually send the file to IT. So Kinship automatically captures all of that information, and that's a first step. But it goes even further to kind of clean up and highlight and format that journal file, which is what you're seeing with all those like lines of text there halfway down the screen. So if you've ever had the good fortune to look at a Revit journal file, it's like a nightmare to try and interpret. But we put in the work to, have an automated way that those files get cleaned up, irrelevant information gets stripped from them, so we're not crowding the screen more than we need to. We color code, the stuff that's successful in green, the stuff that's not successful in red, and help highlight, bring to attention what could be the cause of that issue. So to wrap up, just kind of what are the key takeaways here as far as the importance of usable information, or how to achieve usable information within BIM. Key things I think are you got to clarify the problem to be solved as much as possible. Don't just settle for like the initial concept that might be presented to you, that might come to mind, that a customer, a user, a firm, a project might present, but really like interrogate that and get clear on what is the nature of that problem and what would be the optimal way to solve it, because that's going to lead you back to what is the information that's going to facilitate that most readily and easily. Second thing is to, we say this in our company, to chew the information first. So, just to bring to mind like the nature image of like the mama bird chews up the food and then puts it in the mouths of her baby, so it's easier for them to digest rather than they have to chew it up, themselves. Same thing with information. Like if there is something that you can do to try and kind of pre-digest that information, whether it's as we saw in the example of the crash page, like cleaning it up, whether it's taking into account context to eliminate irrelevant data points and just retain the stuff that's most relevant, whether it's doing some pre-analysis on that, that's going to be hugely beneficial to the person, the end user, for that information to actually be able to easily, quickly, and successfully interpret it and understand what it's telling them and save them time and save them effort. Third thing, presentation matters. Not only like what it looks like, which I think is very underrated in this industry. There's a lot of emphasis on just like, again, give me the data, give me the information. But the way it's presented really matters. It matters because it affects how much time, effort, energy people have to put into understanding that and how successfully they will understand it. And presentation also refers to like where you present it, I think. So it's not just like, is it easy to look at? Is it easy on the eye? Is it easy to focus? Is it, simple and intuitive to interact with? But also, where are you giving me that information? Is it in the, again, kind of the most actionable, most relevant context to the problem? And then kind of to wrap up, like this takes a lot of work. Like I think the end result should always, as I said before, feel really simple and easy, but it's definitely not easy to achieve it. And I think, again, there's a lot of focus in the industry on just like what can you do in terms of functionality, like achieving functionality, allowing people to do things. but how they do them and how much effort that takes, how successfully they can do it over and over and over again is really underrated. And to really succeed on that level, I think you have to put in a lot of work um, to, again, clarify the problem, chew the information, get the presentation right. So that's not a simple task, but it's worth it, because in the end, if you do that, then, you know, people that need to rely on that can rely on it. Tools that get built actually get used, are successfully adopted, not just, you know, tried and then left, you know, untouched, or, you know, the managers love it, the team doesn't use it because it's too complicated. These are things we see in the industry all the time. But so if you put in that work to really make the information highly usable, the end result will be worth it. You'll get that sort of return on your investment and deliver a ton of value to the people that rely on it. So thanks a lot for the opportunity to share those thoughts. Hope that was interesting. And I think a lot of these ideas are fairly common sense, but again, I think they're underrated and underappreciated in our industry. So I hope that, you know, with all of the amazing technology that's coming to bear on AEC, whether it's, you know, AI, ML, VR, big data, that these principles are kept in mind and end up showing up in the tools and applications that come to the industry. So thanks a lot.